behalf, I want to welcome all of you to the Brevard 2040 Transportation Choices Workshop. We appreciate all of you being here this morning and taking your time for this very important program. Your local TPO is responsible for coordinating transportation for Brevard County, 16 municipalities, 2 airports, Port Canaveral, and the Cape Canaveral Spaceport, which includes Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. We are also charged with developing a long-range transportation plan for the county that includes all modes of transportation. Today, we are asking you to help us make choices that will determine what the Space Coast might look like in the next 25 years. And even more important, how are we going to get there? By plane, train, or automobile? We are already the only place on Earth that offers 5 different modes of transportation: rail, road, ship, air, and space. Our research shows that as a community, we also want transportation options, including walking, bicycling, and paddling. And we want more options for buses and rails. We believe that the ports, air, sea, and space, will be the important hubs of our economic growth and prosperity in the future. We are interested in developing community centers where we can live and work. We want to grow, but we also want to be protective of the beautiful environment that we enjoy today. We live next door to the world's greatest space center, so it is no surprise that our community is ready to explore new, high-tech options for living. Someday, we will have driverless cars delivering us to Port Canaveral for our cruise vacations every day of the week. Let's dream big, and most important, let's have fun today. I'm going to turn the podium now over to the TPO staff, who will explain the plans for this morning. Again, thanks very much for being here today and being part of this program. Lee, it's all yours.
Good morning. Let's take care of a couple of housekeeping things. Our program will go about an hour, but you're welcome to get up and go back and help yourself to refreshments through the back door. As I said before, the restrooms are through this door and to the left. So if you need to get up, feel free to do so. I'm going to ask you to take out your phones right now, and if you must use it, please tweet, text, or email someone that you are at the 2040 Transportation Planning event and let them know how important this is. Within a couple weeks, we will have some of this information available online, and we'll be publicizing it for more people to provide input on the direction that we're going. So the more you can talk about this, the better input we'll have. If you're not going to tweet or text or email about us, please turn your phone off, or at least turn it down to vibrate so it won't be interrupting the program. I'm going to do that myself. It'll be my phone that goes off if I say all that. All right, first I want to tell you who's here to help you. If you are a member of the Transportation Planning Organization staff, would you please stand? This is our staff. We're here to help you. Most of us have shirts on with our logo, so if you have a question or you need help, we're here to help you. Planning an event is a team sport, and everybody here worked really hard to get us to this moment, so I'd like to thank them. We also have the folks from Renaissance Planning Group, if they would stand. This is our consulting team that's helping us develop our long-range transportation plan, and they are also here to help and answer your questions, and they'll be working with you later in the morning. So keep an eye out for them if you get stuck somewhere along the way. We had over 100 guests register for today's program. This is our second community event. We met in October to talk about, to hear from all the jurisdictions, all the cities, the port, the spaceport, the airports, everyone that Jerry named, all those folks that offer transportation or are responsible for transportation, got together and told everybody what their plans are for the future. And that information led us to what we're going to present today. So today is going to be a working event. You all are going to have roles and assignments. And it's fitting that we're at the school board because this is sort of Transportation 101 and you're all the students. And you're going to even have homework. So if you were here at the event in October, please stand up. All right, so about half have participated before. If this is your first time participating in long-range transportation planning, please stand up. Great, thank you for coming. All right. We started even before that fall event working with our volunteers who serve on our committees and boards. If you are a member of our technical advisory committee or our citizens advisory committee, please stand up. Thank you. These folks meet with us at least 8 to 10 times a year and are your representatives to us, giving us input on transportation plans on a regular basis. And then if you are a member of the Transportation Planning Organization Board, please stand up. It is these folks who direct the transportation plans, thank you, the transportation plans and the transportation funding. We have limited dollars, and we have to prioritize those dollars to go to the right things. We use these plans that you're going to help us with today to direct those dollars, but when it comes right down to it, the board has to understand those plans and direct the dollars. So we appreciate all of you being here today. Everyone should have a workbook. It's not just a program, it's a workbook. And I hope you have a pen or a pencil. If not, if you raise your hand, if you need a pen or pencil, we'll bring you one. You have to take notes. There's a test at the end, really. If you look on page 1, you'll see there's blue bars on the side of the page, and there's a little tiny page number at the bottom of those blue bars. So we'll be directing you on to certain pages in your workbook. If you look on page 1, first of all, we realize we speak transportation, and that not everybody speaks the same language as us. And we use a lot of acronyms, and we worked really hard to try and spell those all out. But if you look at the very top of this page, right there, it says 2040 LRTP Introduction. So we didn't do as good a job as we had hoped. LRTP stands for Long Range Transportation Plan. At the bottom of that page, we tried to give some of our frequently used acronyms so that you, if we say them, you'll know what we're talking about. But just to make this a little more fun, if Chris, our presenter, uses an acronym that is not on this page, raise your hand and I will bring you a brain. This is a pencil eraser that looks like a brain because it means you are smarter than us. So we just wanted to make it a little fun. We want to make sure that you understand what we're talking about, and that's really hard if we're using acronyms. So we want you to try and catch us at it. The agenda is on page 2. You'll see that our program goes for about an hour, And then at that point, we're going to an open house format. We are going to ask you to participate at that point, but you'll be able to do it at your own pace and your own speed. We promise you that you will be out of here at 11:30. We respect your time. We appreciate you being here, and we want to make the morning as worthwhile as possible for you. And I know the best way to get good reviews on our feedback form is to let you out on time. So we intend to do that. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce Chris Sinclair from Renaissance Planning Group, who will be doing our overview this morning.
Good morning to everybody, and I hope I can avoid any brains going out into the audience, but we'll see. This morning, we're going to be talking fundamentally about an economic growth vision. And to get there, we've had several exercises to have a conversation with folks in Brevard County about what the future holds. Every 5 years, federal requirement that the Transportation Planning Organization all across the country update their long-range transportation plans. It's a federal requirement, as I said before, and what it does is it defines the transportation improvements that federal and state dollars will be used to fund so that the federal government, state DOT, has assurances that local decision makers were responsible for guiding that funding. What's unique about this particular plan update is the economic drivers in Brevard are changing. The space program fueled a lot of the county's growth and maintained that growth since the 1960s. It's been quite a ride. But that program is changing in focus and orientation. So the fundamental question that the TPO asked was, what are the next economic drivers in the county? And most importantly to this plan update, how can transportation investments be made to fund and support those economic drivers? And so what we're doing is defining what the vision for the next 60 years will be for potentially different direction for the Transportation Planning Organization. And in order for us to get to the vision, we are going through a scenarios planning process. And the nice thing about scenarios planning is that it allows test drives of the future. You can try it out, see how it works, and before you buy it, you can say, yeah, or nah, that's not what I want. So each scenario that we've developed begins with a story. Those stories come right from conversations that we've had with you and others. We build a computerized virtual future, and then we test that future. And you're going to see the results of that testing in just a few minutes. And then your evaluations will then help us understand what is important to you that will then go into the vision for the future. Now, it will set the vision will set the context for the transportation plan. So we're looking very, very far out. We're looking out 50 years from now to 2060. The transportation plan is only required to look out to 2040, but the vision will help set the context for what projects go into the transportation plan. And I'm going to ask very quickly, how many of you are familiar with the My Region scenario planning process? Quite a few of you. I'm just going to go through that process to give you a flavor of how scenario planning works and what's been done already in the region. What you're seeing on the screen are two of the scenarios that were developed for the My Region process. The map that's on the left is the trend scenario. And for each of these scenarios, there was a fairly simple story behind the scenario. So the trend scenario, the story that was behind the trend scenario is, what happens if we keep doing what we've been doing over the last 50 years into the next 50 years? So if you look at the map, you can see there's a gray area. That gray area is the existing urban footprint in Central Florida. A lot of green on the map. Those are existing protected, purchased areas or protected areas throughout the region. So the region has done fairly good in terms of putting green on the map. But what you're seeing in that yellow is all the growth that was projected in the region between now, or 2010 at this point, to 2060. And you can see there's quite a bit of yellow on that map. The map on the right poses a different question, and that is, what happens if we aggressively buy land and put it into some sort of conservation status? So you can see the amount of green on that second map, the map on the right, is significantly greater than the map on the left. And what that is doing, same amount of population is being accommodated, but you can see the yellow area gets reduced, which means densities have to go up. So that's the consequences of that particular scenario. The third scenario that they looked at was what they called the center scenario. And they said, we'll buy and purchase some green lands, but we're also going to use land use plans and regulations to help us intensify development in selected areas across the region. So they looked at existing centers such as downtown Orlando, Melbourne, Cocoa, Titusville, and said those are the places where we can intensify development. What if we do that? Then if we do that, then the amount of yellow area shrinks, as you can see on this map. And that leads to a different outcome for the future. The final scenario is what they call the corridor scenario, which looked at transit, particularly rail connections across the region. You can see every one of those lines on the map represents a regional transit corridor. It includes the Sunrail system that's currently under development in Orlando. And they said, what if we intensify development along those transit station lines, transit station areas? And so that's what those circles represent on the map. If we do that, again, we can reduce the size of the yellow area, reduce the urban impact, urban footprint impact, and use that as a strategy to do this. So these scenarios were presented to the public. There was a fairly big show on WMFE back when it existed. They presented the scenarios, had people provide feedback on the scenarios. And what was interesting about it was the feedback that they got was most everybody did not like the trend scenario. But there were certain aspects of each of the other scenarios that they preferred. There wasn't a unanimous decision about which of the scenarios actually worked the best. So the vision that came out of the My Region process had 4 themes to it, all reflected in the scenarios, the alternative scenarios. One was countryside, the second one was conservation, which reflected the green scenario that we initially looked at. The third was centers, and the fourth was corridors. And so if you look at the My Region website, you'll see those 4 themes as part of the vision. So we're expecting, as you see the scenarios today, specifically for Brevard County, you'll see the same kind of things that you like about each of the scenarios that we think will get wrapped into the final vision statement that's put together for this particular process. I want to quickly say, notice on this particular map, the corridors map, there's a rail line that goes from Orlando International Airport over to Port Canaveral. There's another rail line that goes from Orlando International down to Melbourne, and yet a third rail line that goes from just north of Titusville down to Palm Bay. So that was the rail infrastructure in this scenario that was proposed for Brevard County. So let's take a look back. Where have we come from over the last 50 years? And the map is the map series I'm about to show you is very interesting. This map looks very white, and believe it or not, there's some dots on this map, which represents the amount of development that was here in Brevard County back in 1960. Then in the next decade, you can see the additional development that happened in the county. And then by 1980, this is the amount of developed land. 1990, 2000, and this is where we were back in 2010. So just think about all of the things that have happened since 1960. If you compare this map back to the first map that I put up, quite a bit has happened, which should give you some indication about what's possible in the next 50 years. And so let's take a look ahead. If trends continue into the future, you can see there's some additional lands by 2030, and then by 2060, you can see the amount of development within the county. And I've got another map series that I'm going to present later that puts this into a green context. So that's a look back and a potential peek forward. In terms of putting the scenarios together that you're going to be seeing today, we had 3 main events where we got information from people. The first was a series of workshops that we had with the Transportation Planning Organization back in the spring of 2013. We met with the Transportation Planning Organization Board and its Technical and Citizens Advisory Committees. We had a public survey where we had over 800 participants. It was a statistically valid sample that we picked. And then we had a Transportation Symposium that Lee referred to earlier, and half the room stood up that attended, that had over 80 participants. And it was interesting, in each of these different venues, the same themes popped up, and that indicated to us that there's some commonality in terms of aspirations that are out there. Clearly, people are interested in the ports. As Jerry mentioned earlier, this is the only place that's got such a collection of transportation modes, probably anywhere on Earth. There was also an interest in balancing open space and development, looking at more compact development patterns and more travel mode options. And then finally, taking advantage of technology. This is a high technology place. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is one of the most high-tech oriented places in the country. And by far, it is the most high-tech oriented place in the state of Florida, by far, not even close. So in terms of investing in ports, Brevard has a spaceport, seaport, 2 airports, rail, and truck facilities. This is a place where all of this can come together quite elegantly. There was an interest in balancing growth, not completely shifting growth, but balancing growth so that there are more development options within the county, particularly areas that provide compact, walkable communities that promote travel options, particularly walking travel option. And then embracing technology. Not only are we working differently, and not only are we shopping differently because of the internet, but car technology is changing dramatically. Pretty soon, I don't think I'm going to have to put on the brakes anymore. But that is going to go to a whole nother level as we move forward, as cars begin to drive themselves. And what are the possibilities when cars can actually drive themselves? How does that impact how we get around and what cars actually look like, and how roads actually operate? So we'll talk about some of those things as we move forward. There was also some recognition that there's some external influences out there the county can't control, but the county can be aware of. And so the question is, how does the county position itself in terms of the global economic drivers? Clearly, there's going to be a continued increase in international trade. At least that was perspective from the inputs of the inputs that we received. High-tech base will continue to be an important part of the global economy. The feedback we got was that people are expecting demographic changes in the county, as well as across the country. Us baby boomers are getting older. What are all you younger people going to do with us when we do get older? And there's going to be increasing diversity of the population base. There was a concern about energy uncertainty, both the price of energy, the variable price of energy, as well as the availability of energy. And then finally, there was a concern about the potential of weather and climate change impacts. So when we put the scenarios together, we were looking at the aspirations that was defined at these 3 community input sessions. And then we arrayed those against those drivers. And how do these aspirations either enhance drivers such as economic development, or how do they mitigate some of the impacts that are out there? So what I'd like to do now is ask Lee to come back up and do a review of the major themes.
All right, let's go to work. Please turn to page 5 in your workbook. And get your pencils out, and we're going to fill in the blanks. This is what I heard. We're asking, what are the next economic and development drivers that will fuel the future of the Space Coast? We're going to use the scenario planning process to build virtual futures to evaluate impacts. Local aspirations are expressed during the public outreach process. This is what we heard. First of all, economic development through ports. And what I really want to point out here as we go through these scenario developments is that, remember what Chris said, we do a long-range plan every 5 years. We project out, like our last long-range plan was the 2035 plan. Now we're working on the 2040 plan. Even though we're visioning all the way to 2060, the plan will direct our dollars through 2040. So if you think about that, if you think about what we've already done, some of these themes are not new. They've already been in our 2035 plan. And you all, and through this process, we're reaffirming some of those things. They've been tweaked a little bit. We've grown, we've changed. Clearly, the role of space in our community is different than it was when we did the plan 5 years ago. But some of the themes have been there. Since the last plan, we focused on space. Space is a mode of transportation in Florida statute, and it is now a funded mode of transportation by the Florida Department of Transportation. So that's a way that we have implemented the vision that the community has provided. The idea of more walkable communities and centers, we have introduced the Complete Streets program. We will be spending $18 million to revitalize neighborhoods through Complete Streets that have options for walking and biking. We're doing projects in Titusville, Cocoa, Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, Melbourne. So we're already beginning to invest in that new type of community that you all have said you want. So we are going to look at the second bullet point, balancing open space and development. We want to take advantage of emerging technologies. Our external influences are global economic drivers. Think about the widening of the Panama Canal and all the things we've read about the plans at the port. The port wants to become not only a cruise hub, but a hub for commerce. And in order to do that, they need ways to connect, both on the road and on water and on rail. Melbourne Airport has a plan for a rail spur to serve those businesses that are going into that hub. We have demographic changes coming up. We're aging. How many of you think you'll still be driving in 2040? Probably not very many of us in this room. I want to be in the driverless car. There's energy uncertainty as fuel prices rise. We're going to drive less and be looking for other alternatives. And then weather and climate changes are a concern. All right, so that's where we are. I think I'm going to turn it back to you. And we're going to look at how the scenarios were developed.
All right. So, putting the scenarios together, let me just step you through this. This is the technical part of the program, and I'll try to get through this fairly quickly. But there's some key things that we want to let you know with regards to how the scenarios were developed. First of all, develop the scenario stories based on the themes that Lee just went through. And then we allocated people to differing place types, and I'm going to spend a bit of time on the place types. We put together scenario concept maps, and those concept maps then enabled us to allocate the place types to the concepts, and we'll explain how that happens in just a minute. When we more specifically define the transportation improvements for each scenario, and then we have evaluated the scenarios. So in terms of how we got started, we looked at the same population and employment forecast for each of the scenarios. So the 4 scenarios that we're going to go through today, they all assume the same number of people and jobs. The stories themselves, the first story is, what if past patterns continue? The second story is, what if we invest in and connect the ports? Third story is, what if we balance open space and development? And the fourth story is, what if we embrace technology? Again, based on the themes. Step 2 is to allocate to place types, and we've got 2 flavors of place types. One is a compact, walkable place type. The second is a lower intensity, more oriented place type. What makes a place walkable? Why are we making this distinction between walkable versus non-walkable place types? I've always thought that it comes down to the proximity of doors. You know, every place you go to, you have to get there through a door. So the more doors you have within a quarter mile, the more likely you are to walk. So if you go to places like downtown Melbourne, downtown Cocoa, Downtown Titusville, you do see people out walking because it's a very logical choice to make. You've got a lot of doors that you can get to within close destination. And that quarter mile is pretty important to this. The design factors that reduce walkability, they're not intended to reduce walkability, but they have that consequence, is that when you put parking in front of the doors, you're making the doors get further apart. And then when you put areas with single uses, you don't have that much of a variety of destinations to get to. So that's the first thing, the proximity of doors. Well-designed streets. If you have a place that's got good landscaping, and here in Florida, it's shading and street furniture. It makes it more attractive. Certainly, sidewalks are an important ingredient, and just the ability to look into the windows of adjacent buildings as you're walking along. And then finally, low roadway speeds. People do not like to get and walk next to roads that have speeds over 35 miles an hour. It's very threatening if the cars are right next to you. So the walkable place types that we've defined, first is urban core, and these are the ingredients we use to allocate population and jobs to different places in the county for the scenarios. So urban core is mixed-use, development-oriented downtown areas with gridded streets, parking garages, or on-street parking, and anywhere from 3 to 20-story office buildings. And that's something that sort of exists in Melbourne, but it's something that the potential exists in all the cities up and down the coast. The second is mobility type. The second type that we define was mobility hub. Mixed-use community centers with gridded streets, parking garages, and on-street parking. The densities are lower here, 3 to 5-story buildings. Multifamily focus, where you have mixed use, mostly residential with gridded streets, parking garages, or rear parking, and 3 to 5-story buildings. And then finally, traditional neighborhoods where you have mixed use, residentially oriented, with on-street parking or rear parking, very few parking garages here because the densities are lower. The building densities are lower, 1 to 3 stories. So those are the place types that we use to allocate populations into walkable communities. And then you have the other set of place types. The first is lower intensity place type. These are large areas of, and this is the corridor. Large areas is characterized by large areas of residential or commercial buildings along major arterials. And to accommodate automobiles, they've got upfront parking, which makes them very convenient for automobiles, in 1 to 3-story buildings. And then you have single family, and predominantly this is the place type that's out in Brevard County right now. Only single family homes up front and garage parking, 1 to 2-story homes. Then you've got commercial place type, lower intensity commercial. Shopping areas with upfront surface parking, again to accommodate automobiles, 1 to 2-story buildings. And then finally, employment centers, office parks, industrial parks, again with parking up front, and surface parking, landscaping, and 1 to 5-story buildings. So those are the place types that we use, and you're going to see every one of these place types comes into play in each of the different scenarios. It's just a matter of proportion that goes into each one of these. So Leah's going to lead you through a matching exercise.
All right, first let's turn to the bottom of page 5 and fill in the blanks. So Chris has just defined our scenario stories. And we're allocating 2 things. What are they? Population, and what's the other one? Jobs. Very good. Then we drafted scenario, what? Concept maps. Great. Then we are allocating place types. That's what these are, place types, geographically. We're identifying, supporting transportation improvements, and then what do? We're evaluating the scenario results. So turn back to page 4. We're going to spend a couple minutes on these pictures and their titles. Chris went through this rather fast, but this is very important because these are some of the choices you're going to be asked to make. As we move forward into 2040 and 2060, we need to choose what place types we want to have. Do we want to keep the same kind of place types that we have now? Lots of single-family homes, lots of corridors, or are we going to change our mix? So understanding each of these and the pictures that go with them, this is part of the choices that you're going to make. So if we look at the top left picture, which one is that? What? Urban core, very good. All right, just below that, what do you see? I can't hear you. Traditional neighborhood. Now this one's tough because we don't have very many neighborhoods like this. This picture of a traditional neighborhood is more like you would have in a bigger city. So this one was tough for me, but Chris's description of it, it's 1 to 3 stories, it's parking on the street, you can still walk to things. We don't have very many neighborhoods like that. There's a little bit of it in Cocoa Village, but not much. So our thinking of traditional neighborhood in Brevard County doesn't necessarily match this picture, so I wanted to point that out. Okay, the third one down on the left, what is that? Commercial, very good. The next one below that, employment center, great. Okay, top right. Multifamily focus, which is a little different than the traditional neighborhood because it's got more stories. It's a little more compact. All right, what's the second on the right? Single family, we all know that one, right? All right, and below that, corridors, we're very familiar. That's something we have a lot of now. And what's the last one on the bottom? Mobility hub, very good. So I wanted to spend some time on this because these are the things you're going to be choosing before the morning is over. All right, thanks.
I think that was the first time I was accused of doing anything fast, so I appreciate that. All right, let's see. Now, again, let's move on with the steps that we had in the process. The second step then was using that palette of place types that we just went through, how much of that future population and how many of those jobs went to each of the place types. And so you're going to see this graph on each of the different scenarios, and it indicates proportions. So the left part of the graph, with the dark blue, those are all the walkable place types. And everything north of that line, above the line, is population and the magnitude of population that went into those place types. And everything below the line is employment that went into the place types. And then what you see to the right is the amount of population and employment, again, above or below the line, that went into the less intense place types. So this gives you an overall understanding and reflection of proportions that go into these different kinds of places. The next step was understanding what the scenario concepts would look like on the ground. So here you're getting a flavor of the concept map that I'll go through just a little bit more detail for the port center scenario that we put together. And the circles on the maps represent where intense development is anticipated or more intense development is anticipated. And then the differing lines that you see on the maps indicate how transportation is being designed to serve this particular scenario. We use those concept maps to take those place types that we just looked at and allocate those geographically to different places in the county that reflect the construct that we just put together, the concept map that we just put together. That's how we put together the virtual futures for each of the different scenarios. We also we refined the transportation investments. We gave ourselves a budget of $4.6 billion which was easy for us to do, but that $4.6 billion, that represents how much is invested in transportation from now to the year 2060, and it's a reasonable reflection of potential transportation revenues. And then finally, we evaluated the results, and you're going to see these bar charts consistently for each of the scenarios. We have a set of land use impacts, and we have a set of transportation impacts. What you're going to see consistently across these bars is there's going to be a vertical line with circles that indicate the line. That's where we are now. And then the circles that you're going to see on the horizontal bars represent how each scenario did in relation to where we are now and against each other. So in this particular example, we're measuring percent walkable houses, houses within walkable communities, jobs within walkable communities, and we're looking at the current trend on these bar charts, which are in the light red color, and CT against the ports and centers, which are in the blue. So you're going to see a series of these evaluations. So time to recap how we developed the scenarios.
All right, so we have the current trend, and then we have 3 different scenarios that we're going to present to you. What's really important is that this is not a menu, it's a buffet. You don't have to say, I want number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. You can say, number 2 is the salad bar, and number 3 is the main dish, and number 4 is the dessert, and I get some of everything. You can pick the elements within the scenarios, because what we're going to do is we're going to take all of your input, and when you see this again, there will be one blended scenario of the elements that you chose from each of these. So don't look at these independently or individually. It's a buffet. You can pick as many or as few things off the buffet that you want. So that's really important. On page 6 in your workbook, you have a place to take notes on each of the scenarios. And these are the things that I want you to think about as you're taking those notes. For each scenario, what do you like best? What do you like least? And how should we spend the transportation dollars? I also want you to think about it personally. Will this improve the way I live and travel? Will it take care of our population growth? Does it help Brevard grow and be economically prosperous? Does it contribute to our prosperity? And does it protect our natural environment? Those are the questions you're going to be asked at each of the stations. So go ahead and start to think about them right now. So if we think about it, just to put this in context, Chris showed a chart that showed for every scenario, we used the same growth trends. So I just want to put those numbers in context for you. Our population today is 535,000. In 2060, our population is projected to be 873,000. So we're going to add 338,000 people that we have to take care of through this plan. We have to move 338,000 more people than we move now. We are not all going to fit on Wickham Road the way it looks today. So think about that. And then, last minute tally, we are going to add between 2010 and 2060 144,000 additional jobs. Okay? So, if you turn to page 9 and you look at that bar chart, what this is showing us, remember, above the bar is population. So there's 383,000 new people. In the current trend, 287,000 of those people are going to live in single-family homes. You like that, Bob Willie, right? Our builder Bob says, yay! All right. On the bottom of our 144,000 new jobs, 109,000 of them will be in employment centers. 17,000 of them will be along those corridors that we're so familiar with now. So that's how you read that chart. Then on page 10, you see the current trend map. This is 2060. There's a lot of brown, not much green, because we will build out. If you turn over onto page 11, it shows at the very top urban growth. Right now, we have 147,422 developed acres. Existing conditions in 2010, that's that blue dotted line. So if you look at where the CT circle is, along that scale, we're going to develop 63% more acres. See how it's sort of to the right of the 50%? That's about 100,000 more acres that'll be developed using the current trend. If you look down at single family, those are units. So remember on the previous page we talked about 287,000 people are going to live in single family homes. Here we're showing that we're going to increase our single-family homes from 180, we're going to go up 60%. So on this page, the units are different than on the previous page. So these are hard to read. It took me several tries. So I wanted to give you some examples so that they make sense to you. But most important is when we start to compare, and you'll see the dots overlapping or on different places on the scale. All right, let's look at all the scenarios.
Okay, so here are the stories, and these are just a highlight of the results. You're going to be able to go and look at each of the different station areas and ask questions and find out more. But I want to put this in context. So what we're trying to do here with the scenarios is provoke imaginations. It certainly provoked our imaginations once we heard the themes and we started translating them into scenarios. In my mind, we stretched what was possible. We were not shy in terms of putting the scenarios together, but we tried to hit a balance where we stayed within reason. We didn't go too far. As Lee said earlier, these are not either-or options. Could be that you like none of the above. It could be that you like all of the above. What we're trying to do, though, is distill, based on how you react to each of these scenarios, what things matter to you, what elements of the scenarios make sense to you and you think would be beneficial not only to you personally, as Lee said earlier, but beneficial to the county as well. And we're going to take the reactions that we get today to help us put together the vision. So the stories, again, are what happens if past patterns continue, what if we invest in and connect to the ports, what if we balance open space and development, and what if we embrace technology. So the trend scenario is what happens if development patterns continue as they have, and you can see the trends, historical trends, and out to 2060, 100 years worth of growth. Most of the place type allocation went to the low intensity development, which is evident on that graph. These are the results that Lee just presented in terms of what it would look like. And then again, the bar chart, the vertical line on this graph indicates where the county is right now, and the red circles indicate where the trend will take the county in the future. And one thing I want to note here, a couple things I want to note here. Lee was right about the 60% growth in population. That translated into about 60% growth in the amount of land that's needed. Most of that land is occupied by single-family homes, so the mix of single-family versus multifamily doesn't change much. Job mix does not change much with this scenario in the future. We did look at sea level rise, and I want to point this out. Sea level rise, we looked at some maps that were put together by several different sources for 2060 predicting how sea level rise would impact Brevard County. And one of the things that's really fascinating about Brevard is a lot of the county sits fairly high. A1A quarter sits, for the most part on the east side, sits high. US 1 quarter sits fairly high on the bluffs. So you did see some impacts on the west side of the east side of the Indian River, west side of the Barrier Islands, and a few impacts on the St. Johns River, but the number of acres that were impacted by sea level rise in Brevard County was fairly minimal. So I want to highlight, we did look at that and found that it was not as big an impact that we were initially anticipating. In terms of transportation impacts, slightly more people will be living in walkable communities, fewer jobs because they're going further away from these walkable corridors that the county historically developed around. So fewer jobs are going to be walkable. Investments will continue to be predominantly into roadway miles, but there still will be investments in transit and walking and bike trails. And then energy impacts, energy and air quality impacts. What's interesting about these results is that they were actually higher than the population increase, meaning there was something other than just simply more people that was causing energy impacts to go up the way they did. And it likely has to do with the fact that people are living further and further apart from each other, and that drives up vehicle miles traveled, which then has consequences in terms of energy and air quality. So that's the trend scenario. The port center scenario, what happens if we invest and connect the major ports? I'm going to start with a concept map here of how this would look. What's interesting about Brevard is a lot of the port facilities are up in the northern part of the county, which is no surprise here. You've got Cape Canaveral, NASA facility, Port Canaveral, Tycho Airport, the proposed barge facility that the port is talking about over on the Indian River, Melbourne International Airport, and a potential hub, intermodal hub, down in the south part of the county. FEC line will continue to run freight up and down the line, and I know FEC is anticipating that they're going to continue to use those tracks for freight, but they're also going to use the tracks, and I think most of you are aware of this, for passenger rail. And that passenger rail is going to start down in Miami, and it's going to come right through Brevard County and go over to Orlando, and there's going to be no stops in Brevard County. However, they will likely, in some point in the future, have an extension that goes up to Jacksonville, to connect to Jacksonville. And if they do that, then they're going to have to put in an intermodal, they don't have to, but they will likely put in an intermodal station right where their tracks hit the 528. And that presents, in my mind, an opportunity because there will be a stop in Brevard County to this intercity rail system. So that's something to think about in terms of what the possibilities for passenger rail are in Brevard County. Now, so that's represented in the dark blue lines. We were trying to connect ports here. So we also looked at a connection between Melbourne International Airport in terms of passenger rail up to that intermodal facility, that all-aboard Florida facility that I just talked about, so that people could get off the train potentially at that facility and either go down to Melbourne International or over to Port Canaveral, which is an interesting possibility. That rail line would continue to the east over to Port Canaveral, and it would also continue up into the NASA area. And that's intriguing because the Space Shuttle landing strip, what could that be used for in terms of potential suborbital flights? So we highlighted that possibility. Also on this map is a passenger rail connection between Orlando International Airport and the ports to the east, primarily Port Canaveral. And then finally, there's a freight rail connection that the Port Canaveral is currently looking into, which would swing across into the NASA area, down across the Banana River and into Port Canaveral. So those are the major aspects and concepts behind the ports and centers scenario. The allocation to place types, we're thinking that a lot of people are going to want to work and live near the port facilities, so a lot of the allocation went to the walkable communities in terms of both population and jobs, but there's still a fairly healthy amount of population and jobs that are allocated to the less dense place types. The map, the allocation, the actual allocation looks something like this, and so each of the different colors that you see on the map reflect where population and jobs were allocated by place types. And these are the outcomes. This is the evaluation. So what you see here is a series of PC dots, politically correct dots. Port center dots that are in blue that are sitting on each of these vertical lines that you're seeing, horizontal lines that you're seeing, and you can see how things compare with the current trend, which are the red dots. So in terms of urban growth, what's interesting about this is that the amount of land that's developed under this scenario is quite a bit less than the current trend. It's less than the population forecast. And why is that happening? Well, if you look at the next line, you get the reason for that. And this, in order to get that kind of compact development, a lot more of the housing mix will be multifamily housing as opposed to single family. Not that you're not providing any single family homes, but the mix is going to change dramatically in order to get that kind of urban growth outcome. In terms of the job mix, as anticipated, there will be more industrial jobs, and again, the sea level rise impacts were not that great. In terms of people living in walkable communities, what happens because you have more compact development patterns, and a lot of the future growth is going into that. A lot more people are living in walkable communities than now or under the current trend, and a lot more people are working in walkable communities, I should say walkable communities. In terms of transportation investments, the mix is changing here. And rather than so much investment in roads, there's a lot of investment in transit for all those facilities I just talked about, the port-to-port connectors that are out there. And then finally, energy impacts. They go down somewhat, but it's not a wholesale drop in energy impacts. Moving on to the second scenario, connected communities, the CC with the purple dot. Here we're saying, again, based on conversations we had with people, what happens if we revitalize the old river towns in the county, as well as the towns along A1A and the new centers along the western part of the county. So this is the concept map for this particular scenario. These are the centers of where both jobs and development would take place, highlighted in the circles. Some are existing, some are new. It's got the same assumption with regard to all aboard Florida, where you potentially have the red dot that you see on the map, right where 528 comes into the FEC tracks is that intermodal facility. But here what you've got is you've got locally serving transit running along the FEC tracks going all the way from just north of Titusville down to just south of Palm Bay. And that would be a commuter rail kind of service, very similar to what Sunrail is operating over in Orlando. Stops about every 5 to 10 miles on average. Clearly major stops in the existing centers along that particular corridor. And that connection into the all aboard Florida system as well. This scenario also has additional transit in it, so the purple lines that you're seeing on this map are new transit systems, alignments. We call them premium transit. Most likely will be bus rapid transit, and bus rapid transit means buses are running in their own right-of-way. They are running with more frequent service. They have fewer stops, and more development starts clustering around those stops. So it's a very different kind of transit operations than you see with typical bus routes. And you see this, there's a north-south spine that starts up around Vieira and continues down into Palm Bay. And then you've got these series of east-west connections that take you from the western centers into the centers along both US 1 and A1A. In this particular scenario, more of the population and jobs are allocated to walkable communities, less allocated to the less intense communities. And this is how the population actually was and jobs were allocated by place type in the different colors, again to reinforce the station areas along the transit systems. And these are the outcomes. Again, the urban footprint is smaller than the current trend, but that's because a lot more multifamily units will be built. The job mix is a little bit different than the current trend, and the sea rise impacts are minimal. More people living and working in multiple communities. Investments, again, switch from roadway miles to transit. And then finally, this is the only scenario where the air quality and the energy impacts actually came down to be in proportion with the population increase for the county. So this does have it's taking away those added impacts of VMT, vehicle miles traveled. No brain went out on that one. And then finally, high-tech lifestyle. This is an intriguing option. This is sort of what's going to happen in the future as people get more connected in terms of how they work, how they shop, how they are entertained. And then what happens when cars get smarter and they actually start driving themselves and drive people like Lee and I around. All we have to do is get in the car and go to where we need to go to. Here the concept is that what a possible, and there's a lot of ways this could go. Some people predict it could just spread us all over the place, but there's another possibility in terms of what could happen with a high-tech lifestyle. If we're not working in the same location every day, and if we're not going to shopping areas and we're buying online, then those working places are going to be there primarily for collaboration and getting together with people. And when you go shopping, you're actually going to want to talk to somebody about what is this product like. So the amount of collaboration you're going to want to have with people when you actually shop and work is going to be higher. So we're thinking that these are going to be people-oriented, community-oriented places. And there's also entertainment and recreation is going to take place, and people are still going to want to socialize and get together with other folks. So we're thinking that the possibility of this high-tech evolution is that you have walkable hubs that are created, and a lot of sort of community-oriented activities happen in these hubs, and the hubs are going to happen in places where people, where the current hubs are in Brevard County, plus some new hubs are likely to show up. But the other thing that's intriguing about this is what's going to happen with cars, and if you think about it, the possibilities are really intriguing. So for instance, you could get up in the morning and decide you're going to go into work that day, get in your car, put in your GPS coordinates and say, take me to work. Car takes you to work. You're not driving, you're reading the paper or doing whatever you're doing. You get to work, car drops you off at the front door, and then it goes and parks itself someplace else. So now you don't have to couple parking with the front door anymore. So that should have some big impacts. And at the end of the day, you'd ask your car to come pick you up, picks you up, and takes you back home. And with that kind of possibility, maybe you don't need two cars. Maybe what you do is you have one car that you use for routine kinds of things, but maybe you use rental car services more frequently, and you call up the renter, or you don't call up anymore. You get online and you ask the rental car company to send a car to you, pick you up, take you to the destination, and then have them schedule a service to take you back home again. So the whole thought of auto ownership starts changing. And if you don't want to pay for renting a car, maybe transit starts changing. And transit, rather than having such fixed routes, you start scheduling your transit service. And it gets off the fixed route, comes pick you up close to where you live, takes you to close to where you want to go to. Same thing on your way home. So the whole idea of routing cars and transit vehicles through this system becomes very, very different. So what do cars start looking at? Like, what do, how much ownership do we have in cars, and how much do we want to buy into cars? I can tell you right now, I'm getting a car fixed, and I'm not appreciating it very much, but anyway. So those are some of the things we were thinking about in terms of how this could potentially work. And if cars get smarter, the big question then becomes, how big do roads need to be? Because cars can get closer together as they're going down the roads. Can you start shrinking roads as you're moving forward? So here, the allocation to the place types is an equal mix between walkable place types and less intense place types. This is the allocation of place types across the board. In terms of urban growth, again, a smaller footprint. Not as much multifamily housing, but an increase in multifamily housing. More people in walkable communities, not as much as the other two scenarios. In terms of network miles, there's still investment in transit. Remember that flexible transit service I was just talking about. And the energy and air quality impacts are better, but they weren't as good as the last scenario. So that's it in terms of scenarios and comparison of the scenarios and highlights of the scenarios. You're going to see at the final station over here a comparison of all the scenarios. You can see how they stack up against each other, both in terms of the place types that were used as well as the evaluation across the measures that we were using for. So that's it. I probably went a little bit long, but.
Like Jerry said, we're going to dream big. My daughter's vision of this is that she gets in the car and it takes her to work, and then in the afternoon she sends the car and it goes and gets the kids and takes them to soccer. All right, now it's your turn. Now is when you go and make the choices. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you go to every station. So where is current trend? All right, current trend is here. Port centers? Back here. Okay, who's my staff for current trend? Come on up. This is who you ask questions if you have questions about current trend. All right, port centers is over here. Connected communities, back in the back. And high-tech lifestyle is over here. So we are going counterclockwise. All right, now, instead of all 100 of you moving like a herd, we're going to do this like a shotgun starting golf. So look at your name tag, and you should have a colored dot on your name tag. If you have a yellow dot, you're going to start at current trend. If you have a blue dot, you're going to go to port centers first. Connected communities is what color? Green. And high-tech lifestyle is orange. Okay, so green dots back here, high-tech lifestyle over here. Now, here's what you're going to do. At each station, you've got the same information that's in your booklet is on these big boards, because in your booklet, some of the pictures are really tiny and it's hard to see. So we've got them on big boards for you to look at. We have staff from Renaissance that can answer your questions, and we have Transportation Planning Organization staff there to support you as well. And at each station, you have a card to fill out. It's multiple choice. You just tell us what you agree and disagree with at that station for that scenario, and you tell us exactly what I asked you before. What do you like best? What do you like least? And how should we spend our transportation dollars? We're going to ask you to go to all four. Now, you don't have to go in a group. Some of you already know what you want. You're going to go really fast and head out the door. Some of you have a lot of questions because some of it's new. And we've been looking at it for a while, and I even had questions this morning. So it's okay, just take your time. We will be here until 11:30 noon, so however long you need to take to get your questions answered, please take your time and move from scenario to scenario. Lastly, before you leave, we want you to go back to the registration table, and you will have one final questionnaire that's sort of a summary. What do you like best of everything you saw? What do you like least? And what did you think of today's program? Did you get your questions answered? Those kinds of things. We'll take your name tag back, and if you go all the way around, we have prizes. We have some shuttle pins, we have tire gauges, we have dump drives, we have pedometers for those of you who want to live in a walkable community, tire gauge if you want to keep driving your car, or bicycle.
There's a mic right there on the table.
All right, so you want to keep driving, you get a tire gauge. If you want to walk, you get a pedometer. If you want to live in the high-tech lifestyle, you get a jump drive. We've got some shuttle pins, and we've got some reflective scarves for those of you who are going to live in a biking community. We wanted to make it fun. All right, does everybody understand? We will not reconvene because we want this to be at your own pace. You can stay with us for as short a time or as long a time as you want. But we do ask that you go to each station, ask questions, tell us what you like and what you don't like, and remember what we're going to do. The next time you see this, we will have one scenario, one blended vision for Brevard's future. Thanks so much to all of you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and we really, really thank you for taking the time to give us your feedback and input. Thanks, everybody.